Happy Hump Day to you! And hopefully you are having a wonderful Halloween spooky season. And hopefully you are getting ready for this weekend for all the ghouls and goblins that are coming out. And I'm just going to take this off because it's a little hot. Haha! So hopefully you're having a wonderful Wednesday. And thank you for joining me tonight. I do appreciate it. And it's going to be a bit of a spooky one. We're going to be reading some ghost stories to help haunt the Halloween season. So, first of all, I'd like to say my name is Kevin, one of your KCCO Calgary admins, and I appreciate you joining me tonight. And I have to excuse myself as I have a bit of a cold, so we'll be suffering with that throughout the entire stream. So if you hear me coughing and hacking, it's not to add additional ambiance to the story, but it's the fact that my throat is very sore, so I'll be drinking lots of water as I'm reading tonight. So, well, let's get rid of this mask so that I can actually read some wonderful stories here. Pull this battery pack out. There we go. And there we go. Getting back into the Halloween spirit. I'm going to start off with a drink just to get my throat all ready. So let me know what you have in your hands tonight. What are you sipping on to keep your palate nice and moist tonight? Just a couple things before we actually jump into the stories. I do want to say a couple of things. Is we do have our Chive Nation. There, nope, that's. How about we do that? There we go. We have our Chive Nation blood drive throughout the entire month of October. So hopefully you have made an appointment and made a donation. I went in on last Saturday. Saturday? Yeah, Saturday went and gave a donation. And so, yeah, I'm in another 90 days, I'll be going and making another one. So that is part of our Starve a Vampire blood donation campaign. And make sure that you are tagging KCCO Calgary and also Chive Nation on your photos to be eligible for some swag giveaways. So if you're interested in getting some free stuff, go and donate a pint and take a picture of yourself giving blood, and we'll make sure that we send something your way. And with that being said, hey, how you doing, Manny? And oops, just gonna turn on my socials here so I can actually throw up some comments because I see a Manny up there, and I also see somebody in our group, in our Chive Nation Bonafide group, sending a message too. So just going to add this in. There we go. So that one's logged in. So we're going to log in there. Got that one. And turn on Twitch. And yep, that's the right one. Turn on some YouTube as well. And some Facebook so that I can throw those comments up. There we go. There we go. That's not the right one. We're going to do that one. Let's try that again. There we go. Happy hump day, everyone. So, yeah, we're going to get into some scary stories. Search the internet for a few stories, so hopefully they're not too scary for you. Would love to have your comments of what you think of the story as I go through it. The number one story we're going to start today: The Trapper's Revenge. About a mile back from the river stood the cabin of Nick Wolseley, who in the 1800s was known to the river settlements as hunter and trapper of correct aim, shrewdness, endurance, and taciturn habit. For many years he lived in this cabin alone, except for the company of his dog. But while visiting a small settlement in the wilderness, he was struck with an engaging manner of one of the girls. He repeated the visit, and therefore thereafter he found the cause to go to the settlement frequently. At length he won the maid's consent to be his wife. The simple marriage ceremony was performed, but the wedding was interrupted in an almost tragic manner. For a surly fellow who had loved the girl, yet who had never found the courage to declare himself, was wrought on such a jealous fury at the discovery of Wolseley's good fortune that he sprang at him with a knife, and would have dispatched him on the spot had not the man's faithful hound leaped at his throat and borne him to the ground. Wolseley disarmed the fellow and kicked and cuffed him to the edge of the wood, while the whole company shouted with laughter at this ignominious punishment and approved it. A year or more passed. Wolseley and his wife were happy in their free and simple life, happy too in their little babe. Wolseley was seldom absent from his cabin for any considerable length of time, and usually returned to it before the night set in. One evening he noticed that the grass and twigs were bent near his house by some passing foot that, with the keen eye of the woodman, he saw was not his wife's. Some hunter, he said, saw the house when he passed there, stopped to look in, for the trail led to his window and diverged thence to the forest again. "How did this happen, Minnie?" he cried as he flung open the door. His wife answered in a low voice, "Oh, hush, you'll wake the child." Nick Wolseley entered the cabin and stood as one turned to marble. Minnie, his wife, sat on the gold hearth, her face and hands cut and blackened, her dress torn, her eyes glassy, a meaningless smile on her lips. In her arms she pressed the body of her infant, its dress soaked with blood, and the head of the little creature lay on the floor beside her. She crooned softly over the cold clay as if hushing it to sleep, and when Wolseley at length found words, she only whispered, "Hush, you'll wake him." The night went heavily on. Day dawned, and the crooning became lower and lower. Still, through all that day, the bereft woman rocked to and fro upon the floor, and the agonized husband hung about her, trying in vain to give her comfort, to bind her wounds, to give some explanation of the mystery that confronted him. The second night set in, and it was evident that it would be the last for Minnie. Her strength failed until she allowed herself to be placed on a couch of skins while the body of her child was gently lifted from her arms. Then, for a few brief minutes, her reason was restored, and she found words to tell her husband how the man whose murderous attack he had thwarted at the wedding had come to the cabin, shot the dog, and had rushed out to defend the place, beat the woman back from the door, tore the baby from its bed, slashed its head off with a knife, and flinging the little body into her lap, departing with the words, "This is my revenge. I am satisfied." Before the sun was in the east again, Minnie died in her husband's arms. Wolseley sat for hours in the ruin of his happiness, his breathing alone proving that he was alive. And when at last he arose and went out of the house, there were neither tears nor outcry. He saddled his horse, took up the carefully wrapped body of his wife, and rode off to the westward. At nightfall, he came to the settlement where he had won his bride, and relating to the assembled settlers what had happened, he demanded that the murderer be given up to him. His demand was readily granted, whereupon the settlers advanced on the cowering wretch, and with the quick fling and jerk of a rawhide rope, bound his arms to his side. They tied the body of Minnie to her killer and flung the two, one living, one dead, onto the back of a horse, securing them securing them there with so many turns of rope that nothing could displace them. With a shout, the settlers sent the animal plunging, foaming and snorting into the wilderness. When it had vanished into the hoof beats were no longer heard, Nick Wolseley took his rifle on his arm and left the settlement forever. Tradition says that the horse never stopped in its mad gallop, but that on still nights it can be heard sweeping through the woods along the river like a whirlwind, and that as the sound goes by, smothered voice breaks out in cursing, in appeal, then in harsh and dreadful laughter. So there's a nice little story to get us all started. Let's see, the next story that we have. Just grab a little bit of water here to continue on. And story number 2. It's called Blue Denim. I asked my friend to come to the seaside cottage with me one weekend in early spring. I wanted to have it set in order for the summer, but I felt a trifle nervous at the idea of entering it alone. My friend was always ready for an excursion, so we left for the seaside immediately after breakfast. My friend was surprised upon our arrival to find my seaside cottage all draped with blue denim. Blue is not complimentary to my complexion. I always wear some shade of red by preference. I see you do not care for my curtains and table covers, I said lightly. Neither do I, but I did it to accommodate, and now he rests well in his grave, I hope. Whose grave, for pity's sake, my friend exclaimed. Mr. J. Billington Price's. And who is he? He doesn't sound interesting. Then I will tell you about him, I said, taking a seat directly in front of one of those blue denim curtains. I told her the following tale. Last autumn, I was leaving this place for New York, traveling on the fast express train known as the Flying Yankee. Oh, excuse me. When I looked out the window at the landscape, the horizon that seemed to wheel in great curve as the train sped on. Every now and then I had an impression of the tail of the eye, that a man was sitting in a chair 3 or 4 numbers in front of me on the opposite side of the car. Each time that I saw this shape, I looked at the chair and ascertained that it was unoccupied. But it was an odd trick of vision. I raised my lorgnette, and chair slowed emptier than before. There was nobody in it, certainly. But the more I knew it was vacant, the more plainly I saw the man, always with the corner of my eye. It made me nervous. When passengers entered the car, I dreaded lest they might take the seat. What would happen if they should? A bag was put in the chair. That made me uncomfortable. The bag was removed at the next station. Then a baby was placed in the seat. It began to laugh as though someone had gently tickled it. There was something odd about the chair. 13 was its number. When I looked away from the impression, it was strong upon me that some person there was watching me. Really, it would not do to humor such fancies. So I touched the electric button, asked the porter to bring me a table, and taking from my bag a pack of cards, proceeded to divert myself with a game of patience. I was puzzling where to put the seven of spades. Where can it go? I murmured to myself. A voice behind me prompted. Play the four of diamonds on the five, and you can do it, I started. The only occupants of the car beside me were a bridal couple, a mother with three children, and a preach who disapproved of card play. Who then had spoken? Play up the four, madam, repeated the voice. I looked fearfully over my shoulder. At first, I saw a bluish cloud like cigar smoke, but in Hinandros. Then the vision cleared, and I saw a young man whom I knew by a subtle intuition to be the occupant, seen and not seen, of chair number 13. Evidently, he was a traveling salesman and a ghost. He was a most commonplace looking ghost, cordial, pushing, businesslike. At the same time, his face had an expression of utter despair and horror which made him more prosperous. Of course, it's not nice to let a stranger speak to one, even on so impersonal a topic as a four of diamonds. But a ghost. There can't be any rule of etiquette about talking with a ghost. He showed me how to play all the cards, and then begged me to lay them out again, in order that might give me some clever points. I was too much amazed and disturbed to speak. I could only place cards at his suggestion. This I did as not to appear to be listening to the empty chair, to the empty air, and supposed to be a crazy woman. Presently, the ghost spoke again and told me his story. Madam, he said, I have been riding back and forth in this car ever since February 22nd, 1890, 7 months and 11 days. At this time, I had not exchanged a word with anyone. For a salesman, that is pretty hard. You may believe. You know the story of the Flying Dutchman? Well, that is very nearly my case. A curse is upon me and will not be removed until some kind soul. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That day, there were four of us, traveling for different houses. One of the boys was in wool, one in baking powder, one in boots and shoes, and me in cotton goods. We met on the road, took seats together, and fell into talking shop. Those fellows told big lies about their sales. The baking powder man raised the amount of bills of goods which he had sold better than a whole can of his stuff could have done. I admitted the straight truth that I had not been able to make a sale, and then I swore, not in a light-minded, chipper style of verbal trimmings, but a great, round, heaven-defying oath that I would sell a case of blue denims on that trip if it took me forever. ghost shook his head ruefully over his past folly. He continued. We became dry with talk, and when the train stopped at Rivermouth, we went out to have some beer. We had to run to get back aboard. I missed my footing and fell under the wheels. And the next thing I knew, that they were holding an inquest over my remains, while I, disemboweled, was sitting on a corner of the undertaker's table, wondering which of the coroner's jury was likely to want a case of blue denims. Then I remembered my wicked oath and understood that I was a soul doomed to wander until I could succeed in selling that bill of goods. The verdict was an accidental death. Negligence of the deceased. Railroad Corporation not to blame. Deceased got out for a beer at his own risk. The ghost choked up at this disclosure and hastily wiped tears from his eyes. When he had composed himself, he continued. The other traveling salesman took charge of the remains and wrote a beautiful letter to my relatives about the social qualities and my impressive conversation. I wish it had been less impressive at that time. I might have lied about my sales, or I might have said that I had hoped for better luck. But after that oath, there was nothing for it. Back and forth on this road in chair number 13. I ride it for all eternity. Nobody suspects my presence. They sit on my knees. I'm playing in luck when it's a nice baby, as if it was this afternoon. They pile wraps, bags, even railway literature on me. They play cards under my nose, and what duffers some of them are. You, madam, are the first person who has perceived me. Therefore, I ventured to speak to you, meaning no offense. But if you could, I don't suppose you could have any use for them. But if you were disposed to a good turn of good, solid Christian charity, I should be everlasting grateful, and you may have that case of denim at $72.50. And that quality is quoted today at $80. Does it go, madam? The speech of the poor ghost was not very eloquent, but the eyes had an intense, eager glare which was terrible. Something, pity, fear, I do not know what, compelled me. I decided to do without that white and gold evening cloak I'd intended to purchase. Instead, I gave $72.50 to the ghost and took from him a receipt for the sum, signed J. Billington Price. He then smiled contentedly, thanked me with emotion, and returned to chair number 13. Several times on the journey, although I did not perceive him again, I felt dazed. When the train arrived at New York, and I, with the other passengers, dismounted, it seemed to me that a strong hand passed under my elbow, steadying me down the steps. As I walked the length of the station, my bag, not heavy at any time, appeared to become weightless. I believe that the parlor car ghost walked beside me, carrying the bag, whose handle still remained in my other hand. Indeed, once or twice I felt the touch of cold fingers against mine. Since then, I have no reason to suppose that the poor ghost is not at rest. I hope he is. But I've never expected nor wished to receive the case of blue denims. The next day, however, a dray belonging to a great wholesale house backed up to the door and delivered a case of denims, with a receipted bill for the same. What was I to do? I could not go about selling blue denims. I could not give them away without exciting comment. So I furnished the seaside cottage with them. Pity me, dear, I concluded, and credit me, frivolous woman as I am, with having saved a soul at the expense of my own vanity. My friend glanced incredulously across the blue denim draped parlor. It was very kind of you, I'm sure, she said. But frankly, my dear, I would have gone with the evening cloak. So, nice little twist at the end of that story. And I think I'm actually going to stop there. My throat and I'm starting to cough a little bit more, so I'm gonna head back over to bed and try and get rid of this cold that I have, so that I'm better for Saturday. Because Saturday I'm gonna be doing a live stream, um, so that or a pumpkin carving live stream. That's what it is. So we'll have some spooky stories to tell. We'll carve a pumpkin and have some fun chatting back and forth. So until then, I am just going to say cheers and chive on. Unfortunately, wasn't able to make a drink tonight, but maybe I'll make a hot toddy on Saturday to go with the pumpkin carving. So cheers and cheers, chive on, and we'll see you on Saturday.